Here in Nigeria, former President Olusegun Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan are calling on President Bola Tinubu to implement viable economic policies and reforms that would move the country from potential to prosperity. The comments came at a book launch in Abuja.
Potential of Nigeria's economy on the African continent is a focal conversation here as former presidents Olusegun Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan virtually join others like former Ekiti State Governor Kayode Fayemi and other intellectuals to brainstorm on quick ways to boost the country's economy in the midst of the current crisis. They said this during the launch of a new book, Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa, in Abuja by former Finance and Trade Minister Olusegun Aganga.
We are living dangerously on a keg of gunpowder, driving more people into poverty through good policies poorly and thoughtlessly implemented, or bad policies and no policy at all.
Focusing on the solutions Nigeria needs in order to unleash its greatness for the good of our people. It is, as the author himself has described it, a blueprint for taking Nigeria from potential to prosperity.
The two-term minister gives an insight on the book, which he says contains a blueprint on how Nigeria can reclaim its pride of place in Africa.
A country that has people that are not only hardworking, entrepreneurial, confident people. Anywhere you go, you will recognize a Nigerian when you go there. Nigerians are absolutely confident people, and the DNA is a can-do spirit there, the DNA. We are a special breed created for a special country. And all we need to do is get our act together, and Nigeria will become a prosperous and great nation.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who was represented by one of his aides, says the new government is working on fixing Nigeria's insecurity challenges, formulating policies to boost job creation and reducing the brain drain syndrome among youths.
This government is prioritizing addressing the challenges related to security and corruption. With success, this will bolster the appeal of Nigeria as a secure and reliable and viable investment destination.
The author says the book provides a roadmap towards job creation, strengthening economic policies, and providing insight into combating insecurity. Mary Chinda, Arise News.
Interesting viewpoints and comments by two former presidents of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Rufai.
I mean, there's nothing they said there that has not been said, in fact, overstated in the first place. Nigeria has great potential. But potential is not enough because life is not about what you have. It's what you do with what you have. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in a friend's house, a history buff like me, collect a lot of historical materials for pleasure. And we saw the Times Magazine article written about 1960 or 1963 thereabout. Tafawa Balewa was on the front cover. And I think Nigeria had just become a republic then, if my memory serves me right. And the argument in the Times Magazine then was that if Nigeria got it right, the black nation definitely will get it right. Nigeria was a signpost, was a beacon of hope for the black nation. Just like Gamal Nasir was the beacon of hope for the Arab world. But we did not get it right. 5 years after, we had elections that were disputed. The events around the election snowballed into a civil war. We fought the civil war for another couple of months. 1970, we finally called it quits on the civil war. 73, we made some money. We ought to have used that money to invest in our economy, but we didn't. We squandered our riches. That money we made became a problem. We had so much inflation, to a certain extent, that inflation was so high that workers couldn't get by any longer, and they had to give them workers' wage increase in wage. The committee was headed by Jerome Udoji. We pumped more money, inflation increased. We returned to democracy, but guess what happened? The corruption only continued under Shagari. We first blamed the Ghanaians for our problem. We said Ghana must go. But we saw that it wasn't the Ghanaians. We had an affair with IMF. It didn't work out. We had the currency experience in '86, just like we're doing now. So all the things we are doing now, we've done it before. It's a cycle. We had the currency experience. We started something called the Secondary Forex Exchange Market, SAFEM. We said, oh, when we float the Naira, we're going to find a level around 3 Naira to the dollar. It moved up to 8 Naira thereabouts. It never found this level. We went through that military regime again. Elections were botched in '93. June 12 happened. Then we had this seeming ray of hope when we came back to democracy under Olusegun Obasanjo. We got some leeway. Our debts were forgiven by the Paris Club. But guess what again? We squandered the riches again, and we're back to square one. We know what will make Nigeria succeed. Good leadership, fairness, accountability, removal of ethnic bigotry, sensible economic planning. But are we ready to do it? We know the truth about what will make Nigeria succeed. The truth is constant. We know the truth. It is constant. It is not relative. It is constant. But are we ready to do the things that will make Nigeria succeed? President Kennedy said something very profound. When America was charging to go to space at Rice University, he said, we want to go to the moon. We want to go to the moon and do other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Nigeria wants to succeed and do other things, not because these things are easy, but because they are hard. Can Nigeria do the hard job of shunning corruption, having good leadership, fixing our electoral system, fixing our judicial system, fixing our economy, and having transparency and honesty and removing ethnic bigotry? These things are the truth of what we need to do to fix our country. There's no relativism in them. I'm not talking about Einstein this morning, relativity theory. We know what to do, but do we have the courage? Like Napoleon calls it, this 3 a.m. in the morning courage. The French would call it courage et force. Like our national anthem says, if I'm to sing it in French, to serve with heart and might, courage et force, en nation liée par la liberté, la paix et l'unité. To build a nation where peace and unity shall reign. I rest my case.
Okay, a number of issues. The first is to congratulate former Minister of Finance, former Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, what we call MITI, Olusegun Aganga, former Managing Director of Goldman Sachs, who came home to serve his country. And he served in the Jonathan administration in 2 major capacities. And now he has written a book, his own reflection on the Nigerian process, tied with his own international experience as a Nigerian, an ambidextrous Nigerian who has lived at home and has lived abroad. And he titles it, Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa. Now, the jewel of Africa that Mr. Aganga, Minister Aganga, as we used to call him, is referring to, is about Nigeria. Nigeria is the main subject. And he's saying that Nigeria is a country of possibilities that can move from potential to self-actualization. And then, of course, the peg of the story that has been presented before us is a statement made by President Jonathan and President Obasanjo. And the whole point here is that, look, the new administration would have to introduce policies that can be in the best interest of the people. This is what we say here on this platform every day. And I guess the background to all of that is the pain, what President Tinubu calls childbirth pain that Nigerians are going through. So how do you, fulfill the hopes, the expectations of the people? After all, the slogan of this administration is about how to restore hope. So on that score, both former presidents are correct. Nobody can argue with that. But President Obasanjo went a step further to say that we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder and that there could be problems if we allow more people to slip into poverty because of, he said, poor implementation of policies. Now, that's one of the things we say here. Everybody agrees, yes, fuel subsidy removal is fine. You want to do agriculture, that's fine. You want to give the people palliatives, that's fine. But the rub of it is this movement from policy agenda to execution, to implementation, to monitoring and evaluation. This is where Nigerian leaders miss it all the time. And the point has been well made, not just by the two former presidents, but by everyone else, that policies that have been introduced, there's a disconnect in terms of how those policies are being actualized. And President Obasanjo was lamenting. He said over the last 63 years, this country, called Nigeria, has not lived up to expectations. He says we have failed. He says we have disappointed the world. We have disappointed Africa. We have disappointed ourselves. I'm quoting him, almost verbatim. He said in 1960, Nigeria was regarded to as the giant in the sun. Is Nigeria now a giant? No. Nigeria is now a giant with clay feet. So in a sense, some people may say that indeed President Obasanjo was also engaged in a business of self-indictment. Maybe he was indicting himself because he had not taken the time to write a letter. Maybe if he wrote a letter, he would be far more specific, focusing on the Tinubu government. But he's saying, for 63 years, this country of greatness, of potentials, this country that is supposed to be a giant in the sun, is not a giant. If it is a giant, it's a giant with clay feet. What is the purpose of Olusegun Aganga's book? To recommend options for that greatness, how to move Nigeria forward. But President Obasanjo added a few of his own. He talked about peace and security, which he says is really fundamental. He talked about education, which he says is important. And he raised a poser. He said, look, we have Nigerians who are excelling at home. We have Nigerians who are excelling abroad. Why is it that it is the third 11, the MC Oluomo group? Why is it that they are the ones that we keep putting in charge of opportunities and powers? Where are the brilliant, the geniuses that this country, has in abundance? And I guess in that regard, he was trying to send a message to President Tinubu. Don't go and bring third division characters as your ministers. We want people who can make a difference. And in that regard, he engaged in a self-congratulatory exploration, which I think, again, is very instructive. When he said, when he was president of Nigeria, he brought gifted people to come and work for this country. And he started, of course, with Olusegun, with Minister Aganga. He said Minister Aganga was MD of Goldman Sachs when he attracted him to Nigeria. And then he was running at the time the Nigerian Leadership Institute in collaboration with Aspen Institute. I happen to be one of the fellows of the Nigerian Leadership Institute, and I've also attended Aspen Institute and other. Yes, it is true. Minister Aganga drove that process to create leaders, to groom people, to teach about leadership. And it was in that process that he was brought to him to come and be a minister, to serve his country. President Obasanjo also said, look, there are many other persons that he groomed. Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who is the DG of the World Trade Organization. Leslie Obiora, Akinwumi Adesina, who is at the African Development Bank. He gave a long list. Obiezeku Sile, Babatunde Oshotimehin, Professor. Nobody will argue that these are distinguished Nigerians mentored by President Obasanjo. And I think that that's a very timely, topical, contemporaneous, allusion by President Obasanjo to say, look, this country, yes, we can move from potential to real greatness if we put the right people there. Don't go and bring people who were governors in 1999, or people who have been going to the Senate to go and sleep, or people who have nothing to offer. Look for people who have integrity, who have character, and who have ability, as President Obasanjo pointed out. So all of this is not just about, looking out for the poor. It's also about getting people who can serve the poor and deliver. where President Obasanjo, from what I read, avoided mentioning Tinubu's name. He spoke in general terms. President Jonathan also did not mention anybody's name. Both of them are just saying, look, we need a good team. We need to look out for the poor because the people are in pains. Finally, I recommend Mr. Ganga's book, Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa, to everyone, to read it. Because oftentimes we have these book events. A book is launched. It contains so much knowledge, so much information. Nigerians don't read. Some characters will go there. They will say, I present this book with 100 million. They will never read the book. They will say, give me 10 copies. Those 10 copies, they will never open the first page. But all of these books, more will come out. Okay, Tony Akesho says I should go and write my own. Don't worry. In the fullness of time, it will be written. We are not running away. We're here. But the thing is that these ideas should cross-fertilize. People should read them. That's what is important. And I congratulate, to just wrap it up, Mr. Minister Olusegun Aganga, who has provided this opportunity to reflect again on the Nigerian condition. And I hope that, the book will be given to the president by Mr. Wale Edon, who represented the president, and that the president would read it and see if he could get some ideas there. Minister Aganga being a very top policymaker, both locally and also in diaspora, a man of very rich experience and competence, who continues to make himself available for the progress of Nigeria.
Reclaiming the Jewel of Africa, that's the title of the book, has already been established. And former President Olusegun Obasanjo posed a very pertinent question in his speech at the launch in Abuja. He asked, how can you reclaim what was never attained? And that's a whole syllabus on its own, because when you analyze that particular statement, some would argue against that actually Nigeria did have its glory days. And if you look at the antecedents and achievements, you would agree that Nigeria did have the days of its glory when our education was attractive enough for not just our African neighbors, but members of the international community coming to this country to get university education. Now we have such a brain drain that the number of young Nigerians who are clamoring to go abroad to study is alarming. In fact, it's been said that perhaps a state of emergency should be declared in terms of those who have decided to japa, that is, to migrate. When you look at the health sector, there was a time as well when our health sector was so solid that we had members from the Middle East, royal families, come to seek medical attention in Nigeria. We were not exporting sick people abroad to get help. We were importing the resources, the foreign exchange that came with people coming for medical tourism in Nigeria. Nigeria has not always been what we have currently. So whilst I do understand the former president's sentiment, it must be said that we did have our glory days. We were the giant of Africa. The question perhaps would be, are we still the giant of Africa? Have we still been able to maintain that status of being the jewel of Africa? The truth is that because of the sheer land mass and the population of, particularly population of Nigeria, the rest of Africa has looked up to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Unfortunately, as the former president said, we have disappointed again and again because we have not been able to live up to the expectations of the African world. Remember our military strengths. There was a time when the Nigerian military was able to support ECOMOG in fighting and supporting the military of other African countries in the world. Unfortunately, where is the state? We are unable to even contain our own or defend the borders of our own country effectively. We hear of stories of terrorism today. We hear of stories of banditry here and there, and we're not even able to get, at the moment, our security architecture right. He spoke to something with regards to education, and Dr. Bati had asked a question as to why don't we read anymore? And it's obvious that you can just put on your TV and you can see the reason why. The young people, who are one of the greatest resources that Nigeria has, are distracted by reality shows, by the new latest trends, and sometimes you wonder if it's a deliberate attempt to keep people's attention away from the real issues that are plaguing the nation. Education, he emphasized, 20 million still out of school, perhaps even more. At the time President Olusegun Obasanjo was president, we had 10.5 million children out of school. This has doubled in 2023. And he said, if you look at that, then little wonder if you're looking for the remote cause of terrorism, of insecurity. Because when people are not educated, the idle mind, the truism says, idle mind is the devil's workshop. When people are not engaged, the young people who are viral are not engaged effectively, then there will be other alternatives to occupy their time. Can this nation still be redeemed? Absolutely. And in his address, and has been already established this morning, it's one of the key areas that we must look at if we must redeem the jewel of Africa is the issue of leadership. And I'm glad that the president highlighted, and when you listen to his speech, you begin to imagine that actually, at this point, we boasted of having a cabinet of resourceful people from around the world, Nigerians in diaspora who were coming back home. And you'll recall there was a time when more Nigerians, or many Nigerians, were coming back home to establish because they wanted to come back to their home country to build. We had a syndrome where we had a number of people coming back home. But we see now more people trying to run out and escape from this nation. If we must get this nation fixed, we must get leadership right. For leadership to be gotten right, we must educate the people to understand what it means to be governed properly. Because when we talk about elections and people going out to exercise their franchise, you can see the reflection of the people by the kind of people that are voted in. The fact that we're not politically savvy, we're not educated, we don't understand history, we don't know where we're coming from to know where we're going to. So many aspects, but as has been mentioned, I believe that Dr. Segun Aganga has released an excellent book that ought to be studied, read, and hopefully recommendations taken on board. We'll move on to our next story. Police in the Adamawa state capital have arrested 4 suspected members of the Boko Haram insurgent group for planning an attack on former Vice President Abubakar. A spokesman confirmed the incident to Arise News, saying that some other suspects were picked up at various locations in Yola. In a statement, Atiku's media office says the man confessed after he was questioned by police. All 4 suspects have been handed over to the military. Meanwhile, the People's Democratic Party is alleging a sponsored attempt on Atiku's life by what it calls forces who are unsettled by his challenge at the Presidential Election Petition Court. Well, according to reports, this is the first time in terms of an attempt, at least a very obvious attempt on former Vice President Atiku Abubakar's life, and serious issues to discuss this morning.
No, I don't think this is the first time. There's been many attempts, even during when he went campaigning in the north. I think it was Borno, if my memory serves me right. There were attacks on these convoys then. So that was sort of like an attempt to disrupt his campaign. But this is also happening. It is sad this is happening, but it shows you that if there can be an attempt on the life of a presidential candidate in the country and former vice president, there can be an attempt on anybody's life. It just shows you the level of insecurity. Also, it shows you the constant attacks on the lives of farmers. And that's why we're having problems with inflation, food inflation, because farmers can't go to the farm. And if VIPs like this, in Nigerian parlance, there have been attempts on their lives, then you can have it on farmers too, and they can't go to their farms. And it shows you the general level of insecurity in the country. So what should we do as regards this? He must be safe. The security of every citizen as enshrined in Constitution Section 14, subsection 2, is in the hands of the government, the state. And that's why we yield our sovereignty over to the state, and the state must be able to protect people. Has the state done a good job as regards that? Not very good job. That's why we have massive levels of insecurity. So he must be safe, he must be secure. I'm happy that the police have jumped on this. Timmy Frank also called for more security around him. The PDP is also calling for more security around him. We must ensure to do everything, that not just only Atiku Abubakar, but every citizen of this country lives in safety and security, pure and simple. We cannot have a country where you can't move from point A to point B without having massive level of insecurity. And the problem is that's what is happening in Nigeria currently as we speak today. It's an insecurity cesspit as we speak. Can we fix it? Yes, we can fix it, but the state must stand tall.
Right?
Okay, we can link this with what we said earlier, namely that President Olusegun Obasanjo at the Minister Aganga event was saying, look, the big problem we have, one of the problems, is peace and security. And in this regard, every Nigerian is challenged. Every Nigerian is troubled. our circumstances have been made worse by new contemporary realities. And as the tape, one of the tapes we saw yesterday, where there was, you know, a collapsed road in Edo State, and the governor was there, trapped, the governor of Edo State. Even if he too will more or less carry a placard, the boys who were around the place who took the video, they were saying, look, all of us are in this matter together. So insecurity does not recognize big man. It does not recognize small man. So we're living in a pressure cooker society where life has become nasty, short, and brutish, as we were taught, you know, in one of those books that we read. Now, so you now find a situation now whereby even the elites are facing the same situation. What is the main story? The main story is that there was an attempt on the life, an attack on the residence in Yola of Waziri Adamawa Atiku Abubakar, and that the persons were apprehended. This is what Nigerians go through on a daily basis. And government has a responsibility to address this challenge of peace and security, not on the basis of class, but on the basis of the fact that government has a responsibility to make this geographical environment safe for everyone who lives into it, or who comes into it, or who encounters it. That's the fundamental point. However, Debo Ologunagba, in his statement, tried to read politics into it. He tried to link the attempted attack with the presidential election petition going on at the tribunal in Abuja. And he said this is an attempt on Waziri Adamawa's life because of, you know, some of the statements he had made recently. Well, except he has proof. Debo Ologunagba is a lawyer and is intelligent enough to know that you don't make claims that you cannot prove. But what we have seen is that if anything happens to any major politician now, the usual tendency is to say, oh, it's because of a statement I made. Oh, it's because we have a case at the tribunal. After all, even the Labour Party played that trick. Not Mr. Obi as a person, but his spokespersons. When he had that issue in London, oh, the next statement that came out was that, oh, it's because of politics, it's because he says he wants to reclaim his mandate. Well, those who push that narrative should go easy on it. It may not necessarily be the case. Although, at the same time, we appeal to politicians to conduct themselves after the fashion of gentlemen, of sportsmen. Election is a process. It goes to the tribunal, it goes all the way to the apex court, whatever comes out of it. What is more important is Nigeria and the individuals who live therein. And everyone is a citizen. Whether you become president or you become vice president, at the end of the day, you are just a citizen. And the state has a responsibility to also protect you. After all, I have not seen many people who have gone, they've been this, they've been that. So they are ordinary people. So people must always remind themselves that this business of seeking leadership, position, power, influence, is not a do or die matter. So security is important for every man, whether rich or plebeian, whether you are a presidential candidate or whoever. And it is important that the security agencies do their job. These security agencies that are busy now issuing press releases and getting involved in partisan politics, can they pay attention to their primary task, which is to protect all of us so that there will be no attempt on anybody's life?
All right, just to clarify, Chief Timmy Frank of the APC had mentioned that the scope and of the attack against His Excellency Atiku Abubakar was the first time it was happening. That was a clear statement from him when he was reacting to this particular incident that happened in Yola. And this was because the suspect admitted that what they were planning to do was to not only attack the person of Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, but also his businesses and some parts in Yola, in Adamawa State, where he's from. And from the PDP's perspective, they are of the opinion that this is perhaps to attack him because of what's going on with the presidential petition, election petition courts. I very much align with the fact that yesterday we had Mr. Frank Shaibu, and when he had spoken about the fact that there were threats to intimidate judges, I'd asked a question about evidence, and the APC as well had asked questions around providing concrete evidence, because it's very important to be careful as to the narrative that's being spread. Yes, this is a matter of concern and has been addressed. The police and the federal government have been asked to closely investigate this. The PDP had called on the IGP of police to the IG of police to investigate this matter, especially as they've been able to apprehend the suspect who has been confessing. At least he confessed to the others who were with him on this particular mission. But beyond those who were with him on this particular mission are the sponsors. Who are the people behind this attack? They're not acting alone. So the issue usually when we have confessions like this or we apprehend a particular suspect is that sometimes the matter is not seen to its conclusion. So we just arrest people and then there's a turn off their mics, as it has been famously said, or you hush the case so that we don't find out who is behind this. Beyond Alhaji Atiku Abubakar being not just the former vice president, a presidential candidate, he's a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And if he could come under such an attack, then imagine what ordinary Nigerians face on a day-to-day basis. Of course, as has been established, it's not just for him, but Nigerians deserve to feel secure to go about their daily activities. So beyond this particular investigation, can the IG of police also investigate spots and pockets of violence in Benue, violence in Plateau, violence in southern Kaduna, in these parts, so that Nigerians are able to feel as if they have a government and that they're secure in this nation. But again, as we've mentioned, we hope that we'll get to the conclusion of this particular matter, and we look forward to what the investigations will unravel in the next few days. Civil society groups in Benin, the Edo state capital, have held a peaceful protest against the hike in the price of fuel. The protest kicked off at the Oba Square and spread out to other parts of the city. Another group of protesters was also at the Edo State House of Assembly. The protesters rejected the planned palliatives by the federal and state authorities and asked the government to channel the resources to fix the refineries.
We are saying this morning that the cost of governance should be reduced drastically. They should build refineries for the people. That 8,000 naira should be used to provide buses to cushion negative effects of the removal of fuel subsidy. That is why we are here. How person go to buy fuel per liter 620 naira? What I want to do? I want to walk. When they carry 100 and 150, when they buy per liter of fuel 620 naira. My brother, the thing don't tire us. We are dying in this country. We are rejecting the whole process. The Nigerian government was a matter of urgency. They start the whole process of removing the subsidy so that Nigeria will benefit from it. Across the globe, there is no country, there is no society that does not enjoy subsidy. Nigeria cannot remove subsidy in 1 hour and the other they are introducing subsidy. That is our problem. That's our concern. And that's why we are on this street today.
Right, Benin City protests.
Yeah. I also saw a story this morning that a certain northern group is saying that they might have to, engage in a protest. Benin protest started. The question is, where next? Nigerians are suffocating. Let them breathe. The thing about policies we should remember is in the implementation. We have gone ahead, we've pulled out subsidies, which, I repeat, yes, we agree with the argument of pulling out subsidies. But the way it was done and without adequate plans made for the people, that's where the problem lies. So we've pulled out subsidies, now you can see the hardship. And there are no societal buffers. And when you don't have societal buffers, you have societal chaos. A lot of people are suffering. Companies are sacking people. Some companies have to increase salaries, but the question is, how long will they increase salaries? Because for instance, there's another story making the rounds that's saying that crude oil price might rise up to $85 per barrel. And when that rises, it's best you fill your tank now, because just like how, you know, when we're buying it for 480, 490, we thought it was too high, right? Today, we wish we were buying it for 480 because it's gone into the 500s. So if crude oil prices increase and it goes up, the price will increase. But also if crude oil price comes down, we'll enjoy a rebate at the pump. But when you check the historical antecedents of crude oil price, you'll see that there's a stability and it's been trending upwards. So the question is, how do we create buffers? The solutions, the buffers have to be multi-pronged, multi-sectoral. You're doing one for the education sector. You need to be able to create buffers. The increment in tuition fees, I don't think it will all go well. So if you can buffer the education sector with some money, give them. Let that tuition fee come down. Secondly, the agricultural sector, which also has to be multi-pronged, solve the insecurity problem, then also give subventions to the farmers, help them build silos and all of that. Also give them seeds like the government says they'll be doing, give them fertilizers. Help them also with irrigation. The social sector, provide for the hospitals. If it's to upgrade the services in the federal medical centers cut across the country, because at least every state capital should have a federal medical center, do that. Also, target very small hospitals, primary healthcare centers. Also, try as much as possible to reduce the price of food. The quick fix approach will be if we can open our more borders and ensure that more food coming, at least the price can come down. Or find a way around food. People have talked about food vouchers, people have talked about food stamps. I think people too should please, if you can, there's another idea I've got, it's called soup kitchens. Build a place where even if it's at least 1 meal a day in every local government, people can go there and pick up a meal and eat. Yorubas have a saying, if hunger comes out of poverty, then poverty starts to settle out. Baby babonu she bushe. Also, logistics. Carrying food around. Can we revamp the rail lines? Can we get more buses? Can we also fix the roads? Because these are the things that hamper logistics. Also, when you look at it, can we also give subventions to business owners? You see, because in all of this palliative, we are not talking about business owners. They are feeling the pinch. They are not getting any more revenue, but they have to increase salaries. So can we also give them subventions? Can we also help them out? So because if business owners, their lives are better, at least they will not be able to sack workers, because now some of them are downsizing and some are saying working 3 times a week. The elderly, can we also give them care? The pensioners amongst us, can we also give them care? Can we also give them part of the palliative? The young ones amongst us. So I've counted how many sectors, over 10 different sectors. It has to be multiple-pronged approach. And these are the things we need to start thinking of now. It's possible we can do it, but we need to think, and we need to get the thinking on. And also, please, as I wrap up, this is the time President Tinubu should be talking to Nigerians on a daily basis. FDR had something called the fireside chats, where he was explaining every single measure he was putting into the economy when he put in the New Deal during the economic crunch in America. If President Tinubu can be addressing us every week and be telling us what he's doing, what he has done this week as regards this sub-problem, it will go a long way. He should talk to us. It is well with Nigeria.
President Olusegun Obasanjo was speaking yesterday in Abuja, and the major point that he made is that Nigeria is sitting on a keg of gunpowder because of poverty, because of the failure of policy, both of which are the heart of the situation in which Nigerians have found themselves. The government of Nigeria removed fuel subsidy without planning for it, and I spent almost 2 months now thinking about palliatives, what to do. People are coming with all kinds of ideas. Our problem is not shortage of ideas. The ideas are there. They are commonsensical. The problem is how we process policy for the benefit of the people, which is the point that President Jonathan and President Obasanjo were making yesterday without directly attacking President Tinubu. And the evidence of the solidity, of the gravitas, of their observation, as has been observed also by other persons, is what you now see on the streets of Benin. The people are out on the streets. They are saying this fuel price hike is paining them, is injuring them. Before now, we have seen people doing trekkathon on the streets of Lagos. People are not even looking for Guinness World Record, but they have no option in the matter. They can't afford to take a public transport. They can't. They don't have the money. Employers of labor have refused to increase salaries, so they are engaging in dialogue with their feet to be able to at least remain alive. But in Benin, the people, the civil society organizations, they've begun what may become a pattern across Nigeria by staging protests, carrying placards, and clamoring for progress in Nigeria. It is not only in Benin. In Enugu, people took to the streets yesterday. They were saying, look, those of them who have a higher purchase, those of them who have borrowed money, they can't function. That this stay-at-home that a group has imposed on the people, it's not sustainable because the people are suffering from fuel subsidy hike. They are suffering from inflation that is at 22.79%. Only God knows what the Monetary Policy Committee will come up today. And they too took to the streets and said, no, we are not staying at home again. Because to stay at home anywhere in Nigeria, you might as well die. And that was what, President Obasanjo meant when he said, we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder. What is the implication of all this? I think it is a wake-up call for President Bola Tinubu to know that childbirth pain that he talks about, in fact, the people have left the world, though, that they are beginning to troop onto the streets to say that this pain is too much, and he has to watch it. Indeed, maybe that keg of gunpowder exists. What we want is peace and security, not policies that punish the people, not policies that are poorly implemented to the extent that the people of Nigeria will troop to the streets. I hope we will not get to a point where even housewives will go onto the streets and say, look, this country is not going the right way. Because you know how housewives, you know how, you women, before you see people coming out of households and telling Nigerians that, look, this Tinubu administration is causing problem, everywhere where it matters. It's a wake-up call, and the government should act fast. All these holding meetings, coming up with proposals, look, these things should have been done like yesterday. And the people want quick action. They want results. After all, we were promised that Tinubu did it in Lagos. He will do it in Nigeria. Now he has the opportunity. What is he waiting for?
Protests in Benin today, we don't know which location would be next, and that's the concern. The challenge with this is that the people have now they've had enough. And the truth is that, and we've said this a number of times on this show, that when you push people to the wall, after a while they start to fight back. They start to look back and they start to fight back. We're hopeful that Nigerians will remain peaceful and hopeful that the government will announce very shortly and very quickly the plans for Nigerians in terms of palliatives, in terms of cushions, in terms of safety nets to help us, to help Nigerians bear the brunt of this fuel subsidy removal that was so sudden and we didn't have enough time to prepare for it. Another group I'm actually quite concerned about, or perhaps sympathetic to, are the governors. Because the federal government, the president has made an announcement, and they now have to handle agitations in their states. Kudos to some governors who have tried in their own way to provide some form of palliatives, to provide some form of relief. Governor Obaseki has done in his own way as well. He reduced the number of days for civil servants to come into work, and also has talked about a plan to increase minimum wage in the state. But obviously it's not enough, because Edo State is not made up of only civil servants. They have people who have businesses, who run businesses, who have to go to work. We have students who have to go to school. We have parents who are watching and seeing, being unable to feed their children, and that's when desperation kicks in. We don't want a repeat of what's happened in the past, where we have protests that become violent because people are just fed up. What happened during the Occupy Nigeria, whereby the fuel subsidy removal was announced, and then people took to the streets to protest, and then the government, federal government, perhaps hands tied, had to reverse that policy. It has been established. It's a good move. World Bank, IMF, international organizations, analysts have said that's the only way forward for Nigeria for economic prosperity. We have to remove fuel subsidy. But don't let a great policy die because of poor implementation. If people begin to take to the streets in different parts of the country, the federal government might have more than a bargain for in their hands. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And so you wonder, the advisors that the president has, what are they doing? The committees that have been set up, why haven't we received an announcement? And Rufai is spot on. KPMG released a report where part of their recommendations in terms of managing post-fuel subsidy removal was communication management. Let's not downplay that. It would make a big difference, because then you're reassuring the people that you have them in mind and you have plans. Yes, we have had statements from Mr. Dele Alake, but statements are not enough. We didn't vote for Mr. Dele Alake. We voted for President Bola Tinubu. The people voted for President Bola Tinubu. And that's the president. He's the one that took the oath of office. He's the one that people want to hear from. Not just statement upon statement. Where are we going from here? What are the plans? There's a power of communication that keeps hope alive, and people still believing that the best is still yet to come. This is what the president needs to start doing. And of course, the other recommendations that have already been put forward. Again, just to appeal perhaps at this point to Nigerians to keep calm. We already have a dire situation on our hands. We don't want to make it worse, so that we're able to maintain peace across the state, and hopefully state governors can step in the interim to help their citizens whilst the federal government are trying to get their acts together.